The largest invasion in human history came down to a weather report. Two men read it. One commanded the defense of Europe. He looked at the storm, decided no fleet on Earth would sail into it, and drove home to Germany with birthday shoes for his wife. The other man heard there might be one narrow gap in the storm and gambled the entire war on 36 hours of tolerable weather. 6,939 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 156,000 men, one morning. So how do you hide the largest invasion ever assembled from an enemy who has spent 4 years waiting for it? Step 1. You build an army that does not exist. It starts with a wall. By 1944, Germany has spent 4 years turning the coast of Europe into the Atlantic Wall. Thousands of bunkers, millions of mines, steel obstacles sewn across every beach at every tide line, from Norway all the way down to Spain. Everyone in Europe knows the invasion is coming. That is not the mystery. The mystery is one word: where? Look at the map, and there is an obvious answer. Calais, the narrowest point of the channel, 21 miles of water, the shortest route for ships, for supply lines, and for fighter cover. The Germans put their strongest defenses there because it is where any sane planner would land, which is exactly why the Allies picked Normandy instead. Twice as far, worse beaches, and one enormous advantage. Nobody sane would choose it. Now meet the men guarding the wrong answer. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, the old aristocrat who runs the West. Field Marshal Rommel, the desert celebrity, sent to fix the coastal defenses. And above both of them, in a headquarters 1,000 kilometers away, a leader who has personally reserved the right to move the tank divisions. Rundstedt and Rommel disagree about everything that matters. Rundstedt wants the tanks held back in one massive central fist to smash the invasion after it lands. Rommel has fought the Allied air forces before, and he knows those tank columns will never survive the drive to the coast. He wants the tanks on the beaches from hour one. He says the war will be decided in the first 24 hours. Their leader listens to both arguments, and he picks neither. Rommel gets 3 tank divisions. The Central Reserve keeps 4, and those 4 cannot move without his personal order. So the strongest army in Europe now has its counterattack locked behind one man's signature. Remember that signature. In a few minutes, at the worst possible moment, it will be unavailable. And the man who owns it is already certain the real landing will come at Calais. The Allies know he thinks that. Their whole plan is to keep him thinking it. In the spring of 1944, southeast England fills up with an army group. Camps, vehicle parks, landing craft in the harbors, tanks in the fields, 1,000 radio operators chattering about fuel and rations. The 1st United States Army Group, 250,000 men, aims straight at Calais. None of it is real. The tanks are inflatable. The landing craft are canvas and plywood, floating on oil drums. The camps are tents with nobody in them. The radio traffic is scripted, performed around the clock by signalers acting out an army's paperwork. A German reconnaissance plane at altitude photographs rubber and sees steel. And to make the phantom believable, the Allies give it the one thing the German command respects most: a famous general. George Patton, the most feared battlefield commander on the Allied side, is publicly paraded as the leader of the army group that does not exist. German intelligence reasons that the Allies would never waste their best attack dog on a decoy. But the masterpiece is not rubber. It is one man in a London flat, Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spaniard who hated fascists, offered to spy for Britain, got rejected, and decided to freelance. He approached the Germans, was accepted as their agent in England, and then invented an entire spy network out of thin air. 27 agents, a Venezuelan in Glasgow, a Gibraltarian waiter, a disgruntled airman. None of them existed. For 2 years, Berlin paid salaries to imaginary people and read reports written by one man and his British handlers. By June 1944, when Pujol reported that the real blow would fall at Calais and that Normandy would be a diversion, Germany believed him. He was their best agent. Germany awarded him the Iron Cross. Britain quietly made him a member of the Order of the British Empire. Add it up. A phantom army aimed at Calais. A celebrity general commanding nothing. A spy network with a payroll and no people. 19 real German divisions are now standing guard over the wrong beach, held there by rubber, radio scripts, and one very committed liar. All of it now depends on the real fleet actually sailing. And in the first week of June, the weather says no. The invasion is built around a short list of physical requirements. A low tide at dawn, so the boat crews can see the obstacles. A late rising moon for the paratroopers. Seas calm enough that flat-bottomed landing craft do not founder. Those conditions align on June the 5th, 6th, and 7th. Miss the window, and the tides do not cooperate again for 2 weeks. The fleet loads. And then a storm rolls into the channel. The man carrying the decision is Dwight Eisenhower, and the man he is listening to is a tall, careful Scottish meteorologist named James Stagg. On the 4th of June, with gale force winds coming, Stagg tells him the 5th is impossible. Eisenhower postpones. Ships already at sea turn around in the dark. Then, late that same night, Stagg comes back with something almost nobody expected. A gap. A ridge of high pressure. Maybe 36 hours of barely acceptable weather, starting the morning of June the 6th. Consider what is being asked. 156,000 men, on the word of a weather map, in an age before satellites. If Stagg is wrong, the invasion drowns in the swell before it reaches the sand. At 4:30 in the morning on June the 5th, Eisenhower polls his commanders one last time, walks the room, and gives the order to go. His exact words were not written down, and the men present remembered them differently. The decision was the same in every version. That afternoon, he takes out a small piece of paper and writes a second message, to be released only if the landings fail. It says the troops did all that bravery could do, and that if there is any blame or fault, it is his alone. He dates it July the 5th. His mind is somewhere else. It is the only mistake on the page. He folds it into his wallet. Across the channel, the German meteorologists have seen the same storm and none of the gap. Their conclusion is that no invasion is possible for days. Coastal alert levels relax. Senior officers scatter to a war game. And the field marshal in charge of the coast packs the birthday shoes and drives home to Germany. Same sky, 2 forecasts. Everything that follows falls out of that difference. A few minutes past midnight, June the 6th, the first Allied soldiers touch France. 6 gliders full of British troops crash land in a field beside a canal bridge 16 minutes past midnight, and take it in about 10 minutes. The bridge is needed so the invasion's left flank cannot be counterattacked. It is held by men who arrived by crashing. Then the paratroopers come. 20,000 of them, American and British, into the dark behind the beaches. Almost nothing goes to plan. Cloud and flak scatter the transport aircraft, and men land miles from their zones, in flooded fields, in orchards, in town squares. One American, Private John Steele, comes down onto the church steeple of Sainte Marie Église and hangs there by his canopy, playing dead above a burning square, for about 2 hours. He is captured and later escapes. There is a mannequin on that steeple today. By any reasonable measure, the drop is chaos. And then the chaos starts working. On the German side, the reports place paratroopers everywhere, because scattered men are everywhere. And mixed in with the real reports are the fake ones. Hundreds of half-size cloth dummies on parachutes, rigged with firecrackers, dropped deliberately to sound like firefights in the wrong places. Every level of the German command now has the same problem. The reports cannot all be true. So, which are the lies? Patrols chase dolls through hedgerows. Real bridges fall while staff officers argue about phantoms. And the tank divisions? The ones that need one signature to move, do not move. The request goes up before dawn. The order does not come down. Morning arrives with the counterattack still parked. Off the coast, in the last dark, the gap in the weather holds. The fleet is already in position. The sun comes up on the largest armada ever assembled. 5 beaches, 60 miles of coast. Americans at Utah and Omaha. British at Golden Sword. Canadians at Juneau. At 5:30, the naval guns open, and for the men of the landing craft, the French coast becomes a wall of smoke and light. At Utah, the first wave comes ashore in the wrong place. The current has pushed the boats 2,000 yards south of the plan. The senior officer on that sand is Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., son of the president, 56 years old, walking with a cane. He scouts inland, discovers the accident has delivered them opposite a weaker sector, and is said to have announced, "We'll start the war from right here." 23,000 men cross Utah Beach. 197 are killed. On this beach, on this morning, that counts as a miracle. Between the American beaches, a 100-foot cliff called Point du Hoc, and on top of it, 6 heavy guns that can reach both. 225 Rangers cross the sand under fire and go up the cliff on ropes and ladders, while the defenders cut lines and drop grenades. They take the top. They reach the gun positions. The guns are not there. Telegraph poles sit under the camouflage nets. The guns have been pulled inland to dodge the bombing. So 2 sergeants, Leonard Lamel and Jack Kuhn, follow the tracks into the fields, find 5 of them sitting unguarded in an orchard, and wreck them with thermite grenades jammed into the mechanisms. The most dangerous battery in the sector is destroyed by 2 men on foot. By the time relief arrives days later, 6 in 10 of those Rangers are casualties. The cliff was real, even if the guns were not. To the east, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The tide and the obstacles chew up the first ways, and specialist tanks, swimming tanks, flail tanks, beating paths through the minefields, open the exits. About 25,000 ashore at Gold, more than 21,000 at Juno, where the Canadians pushed deeper inland by nightfall than almost anyone else. 29,000 at Sword. The day's one German armored counterattack, the only tank division close enough to strike, goes in north of Caen in the afternoon. A corps commander tells the attack's leader that if the British are not thrown into the sea, the war is lost. A few tanks actually reach the coast. Then, pounded by tanks, artillery, and the fleet's guns, the attack falls back. The counterstroke, the whole German strategy depended on, has been and gone, and most of the front never saw it. Caen itself, the day's most ambitious objective, does not fall. It will take weeks. But notice what has already happened. 4 of the 5 doors into Europe are open, at a cost far below the planners' fears. The Atlantic Wall was built to face the sea, to stop an enemy at the waterline, or not at all. There is one beach where that plan is working. Omaha is the worst geography on the invasion coast. A curved shelf of sand under a 100-foot bluff with only 5 ravines leading up and off it, every one of them covered by concrete strongpoints that have survived everything thrown at them. The plan assumed the defenses would be flattened before the first boat arrived. The heavy bombers came in through cloud, held their loads a few seconds too long, and put almost everything in the fields behind the bluff. The naval barrage was 35 minutes against fortifications built for years. The men were promised craters to shelter in on the sand. There are no craters. The swimming tanks that were meant to arrive first are launched into a swell they were never designed for. 29 set out for one sector, 27 sink. Some crews get out. Many do not. So the ramps drop at 6:30 on 300 meters of open, wet sand, in front of machine guns that were never silenced. Up on the bluff, the strong point above the easternmost draw is held by about 40 men. Some are teenagers. One of them, at a machine gun position, is an 18-year-old named Franz Gockel, drafted at 17, who has spent his war pouring concrete and watching an empty sea. He has been awake since 1 in the morning. At dawn, he watched the sea fill with ships. Wait for the ramps, he was told, then fire. What follows is the morning that gave D-Day its reputation. The first waves are cut down at the waterline. Men wade past men who did not make it. The survivors pile against the one strip of cover, the seawall and the shingle bank, while the tide rises behind them over the wounded. Officers who try to organize a second move die organizing it. For 3 hours, the beach does not work. What saves Omaha is not a plan. Destroyers come in so close they are nearly aground, firing flat into the concrete at under 1,000 meters. And small groups of infantry, 20 and 30 at a time, stop waiting for the draws to open and climb the bluff itself, through smoke from the burning grass, between the strong points, where no gun is aimed. The wall was built facing the sea. Every firing slit faces the water. The concrete cannot be cracked from the front, and it does not need to be. By early afternoon, the attackers are behind the strong points, taking them one at a time from the landward side, through their doors. Gockel is shot through the hand that afternoon, and goes out through the rear trench, inland, into 11 more months of war. By midnight, 34,000 Americans are ashore at Omaha. It has cost around 2,400 killed, wounded, and missing. The worst toll of any beach. Most of it paid in the first 3 hours. Much of it in the first minutes. By men who never got past the water. The door held all morning. And then, it was a door. Count the day. Around 156,000 Allied troops ashore between midnight and midnight. 4,414 of them confirmed killed, a number that took historians decades to establish name by name. German losses that day were never exactly counted. The estimates run from 4 to 9,000. Nearly every specific objective on the maps was missed. Caen stood. The beachheads were thinner than planned, and none of it mattered, because the one objective that counted was achieved everywhere. The Allies were on the continent, and they could not be thrown off. The counterattack that might have done it never assembled. The armored reserve was released at 4 in the afternoon, half a day too late, into skies owned by Allied aircraft. And the deeper reserves, the divisions at Calais, stayed at Calais, because the Phantom Army was still there. For weeks after June the 6th, German intelligence kept warning that the real invasion, the bigger one, was still coming at the narrow crossing, exactly as their best agent in England kept reporting. Real divisions stood guard against rubber tanks, while the real war got ashore and grew behind them. The lie outlived the landing it protected. Eisenhower took a piece of paper out of his wallet and never had to use it. Above the bloodiest stretch of Omaha, on the flat top of the bluff, there is now an American cemetery. More than 9,000 white markers, in rows. On the ground, the machine guns covered. Directly below it, the concrete is still there. Scarred, rusting, open. Tourists step through the doorways. Franz Gockel, the 18-year-old at the machine gun, survived his 11 months. In 1958, he came back to the bluff, and then he came back almost every June for the rest of his life. He wrote letters to the American veterans who had been on the sand below him, and they wrote back, and they met up there by the graves, old men shaking hands over the water. He died in 2005. The largest invasion in human history came down to a weather report. One side read it and went home. The other side read it and went. Everything else, the rubber army, the imaginary spies, the scattered paratroopers, the boys on the sand and the boys in the concrete, hung on 36 hours of barely good enough weather, read correctly, one time, by the right man. If you want the 11 months that came after this morning, that video is next.